I want to show you how Islamic scholars, apologists, and translators of the Quran shamelessly deceive people. And this video is especially important for Muslims to watch, because you will see that Islamic scholars do everything to misrepresent the Quran and corrupt the Quran, which they consider Allah's word, just to keep Islam from being wrong. If you're a Muslim, at the end of this video, your trust in both Islamic scholars and your holy book should be heavily shaken. In my former video, I took a Quran verse, chapter 10, verse 5, and pointed out that the Quran calls the moon a light, when in reality, the moon is neither light nor does it emit light. It reflects light coming from the sun. The reason the Quran uses shining light for the sun and nur, light, for the moon is obvious. The sun looks like this and the moon looks like this. Let's look at regular, old, classic translations of this verse. As you can see, the classic translations accurately translate that part of this verse, in which the sun is a shining light, a shining object, and the moon is a light. These translations are still honest, because back then we didn't care much about reality and science, and there weren't many critics of Islam who pointed out flaws in the Quran. But now let's come to a more modern translation. It is the first English Quran translation that you find when you Google Quran, or when you search for a Quran verse. Sahih International, currently the most widespread Quran translation online. It is he who made the sun a shining light, and the moon a derived light, and determined for its phases. Whoa, do you see that? It says derived light, or a reflected light. Although it doesn't say such a thing in the original verse, it just says nur, and the word nur means simply light. In the Arabic text, it only calls the moon a light. The same thing can even be found in another verse, chapter 71, verse 16. Again, the Quran calls the moon a light, but the Sahih International translation adds its own words to the verse and calls it a reflected light or a derived light. Adding words in order to make the Quran look correct is a corruption. And Islamic apologists and scholars who create these corruptions are liars. This is how they want to defend Islam with deceptions. This is how they want to deceive Muslim believers. And this shows how fragile and how outdated and a human product Islam is.
The Apostate Prophet's entire video essentially argues that because some scholars, apologists, and translators infer certain meanings from words in the Quran, specifically regarding the light of the moon, this implies they're all deceiving you and Islam is suspect as a result. Therefore, you should only trust the Apostate Prophet. How convenient. Now, there's obviously a little more to this video, content which I'll address at a later point, but this is the gist of his argument. However, there are some major problems with his claims. You see, there are a number of logical fallacies he's committed throughout his video. Among them is the idea that because one translation, i.e. Sahih International, appears erroneous, this therefore proves that Islamic scholarship in general cannot be trusted. But this is nonsensical and is known as the fallacy of hasty generalization, or a fallacy of jumping to conclusions where the key error is to overestimate the strength of an argument based on too small a sample for the implied confidence level or error margin. And yet another fallacy he's committed in conjunction to this is that such an erroneous translation proves that Islam is somehow false, or in his words, fragile, outdated, and man-made. But this is also absurd, and is merely an example of a non sequitur. You see, there is no necessary connection between the integrity of an individual and the validity of their beliefs. Just because someone fails to explain an idea correctly does not mean said idea is false. All it tells us is that the person or persons in question are either bad at explaining things, may lack sufficient knowledge of what they're promoting, or simply lack integrity. That's it. But let's take a look at another claim in his video, that the Quran is supposedly scientifically inaccurate because it describes the moon as a light. Here, the Apostate Prophet further showcases his hypocrisy.
It is he who made the sun a shining light, and the moon a light, and determined for its phases, that you may know the number of years and account of time. Allah has not created this except in truth. He details the signs for a people who know. Chapter 10, verse 5. The original Arabic text simply says that Allah made the sun a lamp, a shining light. No objection to that, although the Quran never reveals the true nature of the sun. But then it calls the moon a nur. Nur means simply light.
So here, the Apostate Prophet has a problem with the Quran describing the moon as a light. However, he has absolutely no problem with the sun being described as a lamp or a shining light. But according to his own methodology, he should have a problem with the sun being described as a lamp or a shining light. Why? Because the sun is not a lamp or a shining light. Rather, it is a star that emits light. It is not a man-made object that holds a source of light, nor is it composed of electromagnetic waves. Rather, it is a natural object made of plasma. Therefore, according to the Apostate Prophet's own reasoning, he too is scientifically illiterate. That said, I don't actually believe the Apostate Prophet is scientifically illiterate. Rather, I think the reason he agreed with the sun being described as a lamp or a shining light is because he understands the use of figurative language. However, because he lacks basic critical thinking skills, he did not attempt to apply that understanding consistently. Why does the Quran describe the sun as a lamp and a shining light, but the moon as just a light? Well, the answer is quite simple. Because that's how they appear in the sky. Thus, there is no reason to suggest that this passage is meant to convey a scientific understanding of these two objects. Anyone who suggests otherwise, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, is committing a serious error. And yes, I'm even calling out Zakir Naik here. For more information as to how the Quran should be read, please refer to my lecture titled Science and the Quran, A Forced Marriage. In conclusion, if this is the Apostate Prophet's ultimate demonstration, i.e. his best possible attempt at criticizing Islam, then there is little else I can say but this.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.